Chapter 30. Flamber. Pour us something a little stronger, said the one-eyed lady. She'll need something to calm her nerves. How do you know about the edge? Asked Ruby. Flamber snorted. Pretty hard to miss that glowing gauntlet, especially one that pulsates to the heartbeat of the owner. Ruby studied the gauntlet that pulsated in the same time as her racing heart. The barmaid put down 2 red whiskies on the bar. Not many have such a strong link to the edge, said Flamber. Not for a very long time. Where do you hail from, Ruby? How do you know my name? Word travels fast in Imperial, especially that of disgracing the prince on his night of nights. She extended her hand and displayed a hologram to Ruby of her and Prince Garnet together, and the punch. What is that? Asked Ruby. It's a recording. It was beamed across the city due to it being a royal event. It turned out to be much more entertaining than I hoped. There's quite a few of us who'd like to break the prince's nose. Ruby heard the bartender snort with laughter. It was a great punch. You don't like the prince either? Said Ruby. The royals have screwed up everything for us down here. They lie above us and look down at us as subhuman. But now that you have the edge, said the barmaid, they'll be coming for you in force, finished Flamber. That's why we should be leaving. Shouldn't we, Ruby? We? Ruby said. I suppose you've got someone else that can help you? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Ruby backpedaled. I'd appreciate any help I can get, she said sincerely. I thought as much. Follow me. They thanked the barmaid and Flamber headed out the door at a brisk pace, Ruby following behind her. The wind had gotten colder and the denizens they passed stared back at them with bleary eyes and gaunt faces, their bodies strange and misshapen. What's wrong with them? Noticing how many of them there were. Addlers, said Flamber. Sorry, replied Ruby. Addled by drugs. They're junkies, addicts, whatever you call them. Stay close, Ruby, said Flamber. Don't make eye contact. Credits? Said an Adler's voice in Ruby's mind link. Ruby had 1. Ruby hastened along the road with Flamber, doing her best to avoid the Adlers she passed. Ruby led Flamber out through the winding streets of Imperial's underbelly before stopping before a small red door and heading inside. Within was a firewood-finished log house, a roaring fireplace casting shadows across the large room. Flamber and Ruby were alone, the establishment deserted. Is this your place? Asked Ruby, wheeling around. It's very spacious. Flamber brought out 2 chairs resting against the wall. It isn't much, but it keeps us safe. Us? I have a friend here with me. He's a bit shy of people. Plus, his appearance can be a little confronting, so I need to warn you ahead of time. Perhaps after a drink he'll come out. Flamber produced a table out of the floor with a push of a button, complete with drinks inside. Atop it was a drinking pitcher and various bottles. Care for something before we turn in? Asked Flamber. Please, said Ruby, taking a drink in her hand. It was a soft wine-like drink, yet with a kick at the end like whiskey. Ruby liked it immediately. Now connect with me so I know what I'm dealing with. Ruby blinked, confused by the question. Your mind link. Ruby felt the tingle of something wanting to connect with her. Why? To find out if I can trust you or not. Ruby hesitantly accepted and felt the probe move swiftly past her defenses and search through her mind. Flamber wasted no time in going into details of her past and her recent experience within the palace. Standard issue defenses, huffed Flamber. Going to need to upgrade that. Ruby winced as her mind was excavated for information. In a flash, it was suddenly over. Ruby gasped for air as Flamber leant back and took a swig from her drink. Abe, huh? Suspected as much, remarked Flamber. Ruby coughed, wincing through bleary, tear-filled eyes. How did you... Come, said Flamber, standing. It's time to sleep. We'll talk more tomorrow. You shouldn't sleep with that gauntlet on. It'll be uncomfortable. Think of it as its normal form. Ruby did so, and watched the edge return back to a ring. How did you know how to do that? Save your questions for tomorrow. Ruby saw a hidden door slide open, revealing a small bed, illuminated by soft red light. Flamber bid Ruby good night and ushered her into her room, where she collapsed onto the bed, not realizing her exhaustion. Ruby awoke to the sound of breathing. Bolting upright in the darkness, she saw nothing. The raspy, metallic breathing continued, somewhere in the room with her. Who's there? She said, scared of what may lay in the dark. A red pair of eyes illuminated upon the ground, the breathing turning into panting. More lights flickered on, revealing the front and back legs made of red metal. Ruby could see the outline of a large dog, completely metal, with multiple lights upon its body. Ruby did not know what to make of the creature, as it gazed at her with red eyes. Are you Flamber's friend? She asked aloud. A sharp bark erupted from the dog and it pattered over to Ruby, nuzzling her hand. The dog was warm, despite its metal body. The dog circled the floor next to Ruby's bed and then curled up before closing its eyes. For some strange reason, Ruby felt safer with the dog beside her and drifted back off to sleep quite easily. It was morning when she awoke, the soft rays of light coming through the window above her bed. The dog responded to her movements, wagging its metal tail as she sat up in bed and patted it. "I see you've met my shy friend," said Flamber from the doorway. "Rusty, come here. Give the girl some space." The dog hastened to Flamber's side, leaning against her. A large red coat, pants, shirts, and boots were hurled at Ruby, landing on her bed. "What's this for?" she asked. "We're leaving the city right now. The Imperial Palace has been emptied with titles searching for you. We cannot stay. Though the chances of our escape are slim, there are friends who can help us. Now come on. We need to move." Ruby got dressed and they headed outside into the bright early morning of the Red City. In the light in the light of the sun one. In the light of the sun, Ruby saw the slums where the people huddled together, dressed in ragged clothing, women and children alike. As they walked along the streets, Ruby noticed that there were no men and asked Flamber why. "In the mountains," she replied. "For the great expansion of the city, there is always need for industrial work. They are digging rocks and driving machines or some form of hard labor. All the while the women and children hope they'll come home," she finished bitterly. "Is it not safe?" replied Ruby. Flamber snorted. "Not safe? It's the most dangerous job in the city, yet they get no compensation for loss of limb or life. They're fodder for the king's grand ambition to take over the whole planet." She started getting angrier, cutting at the air with her hands. Ruby fell silent as they made their way through the streets, the sight of the poor making her distaste for the Imperial Palace and the royalty within it even more strong. They came to a high gated area with a large wall jutted upwards. "We've got to go over this," said Flamber, pointing to the top. Ruby squinted to see it was many stories high. "How do we get over that?" she wondered, not seeing Flamber drop behind her. All of a sudden, Flamber grabbed her around the waist. "Hey, what are you—" Ruby began to say, before they launched up off the ground, propelled into the air by an unknown force. They cleared the high wall and beheld the dry, cracked landscape of the wastelands surrounding the city. They landed gently on the other side. It was only then Ruby saw what had carried them. From underneath her came the metal dog, its paws booster jets which closed and formed into padded feet once more. "You're full of tricks, aren't you?" remarked Ruby, patting his metal skin, prompting a wagging tail. "Let's move. The patrol will be doubled or tripled," said Flamber. "We cannot afford to delay." They moved across the rocky terrain. Scouting ahead was the dog, followed by Flamber, who continually told Ruby to hurry up as she huffed and puffed at breakneck speed. A sharp cry from the dog made Flamber drop into the ground as though she'd been shot. "What happened?" asked Ruby. "Get down!" Flamber hissed. Ruby promptly dropped down as the sound of crunching feet could be heard in the distance. Down the sharp incline below them was a group of red soldiers. Though Ruby could not see them, she heard the unified march of feet. Flamber motioned her to be quiet, while up ahead the dog crouched down onto the ground, keeping as low as possible. Soon the footsteps began to grow quieter as they stomped into the distance. Ruby made a motion to stand, but Flamber caught her arm and pulled her back down. A bright red light appeared where Ruby had just been, the heat from the light so intense Ruby could feel the heat on her skin. A deep whirring noise began to grow louder, like that of a small aeroplane. Ruby felt the searing heat again, its direction closer to where they were. Ruby glanced up at Flamber, who had lifted herself up onto her hands and feet. Flamber shot up from the ground and began sprinting down the hill. She brandished her long sword and leapt upwards, disappearing down the sharp incline. Ruby heard the sound of high-pitched whirring, clanging steel, and then suddenly nothing. She did not want to look up, should the thing burn her alive. She held her arms over her head, waiting for any sound to tell her the danger had passed. "You coming?" said a voice. Ruby glanced up to see Flamber standing above her, her long sword dripping in red blood. Behind her was a metal carcass laying upon the ground, split in two. Ruby shot up and saw the thing on the ground. It was over 6 feet long with wires and antennae jutting out from all directions. "A watcher," said Flamber, anticipating Ruby's question, "used to track heat signals and incinerate anything that moves that hasn't been verified outside city clearance. Come on, we have to keep moving." Ruby tore her eyes from the ruined beast and started down the hill after Flamber and the dog. Ruby became enamored by this woman. There seemed to be nothing she couldn't do. They travelled hard across the barren wastelands, avoiding hunting parties and watchers along the way. The sun beat down upon them as they crossed the vast expanse of rocks and craggy terrain. Ruby took in her surroundings. Behind her was the vast expanse of the Red City, its sheer size dominating the horizon. Yet away from it, she could see mountain ranges that were stretching high into the sky, dark maroon and intimidating as they disappeared into the clouds. Ruby marveled at the sheer size of the ranges as they stretched outwards like a fan. Besides the ranges, there was little vegetation to speak of, other than weeds that covered the rocks. She saw no wildlife, save for insects that darted away seeking refuge from the group. Flamber brought them to a stop, motioning for silence. Ruby gazed, seeing nothing around her. It was then she heard something, a dull roar of an engine. "Run!" yelled Flamber. They darted across the rocks as the roar grew louder. Ruby glanced back to see the glint of an airship in the sky. The trio scrambled as fast as they could to try and find refuge, but the horizon was barren, save for a large collection of boulders that were strewn haphazardly, one on top of each other. "Inside!" yelled Flamber as the airship drew closer. Ruby and the dog squeezed their way into an opening between the boulders, a stench overwhelming them as they huddled inside. "What's that smell?" said Ruby, coughing and gagging at the putrid odor. "Be quiet," ordered Flamber, peeking out between the rocks as the airship began to descend. The ship was oddly familiar to Ruby as she watched it come to a land upon the ground. The hatch of the vessel opened and a red-haired man stepped out of it, his appearance making Ruby's heart jump. "It's Julian," said Ruby, leaning forward to go out and greet him. Flamber grabbed her coat and pulled her back. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "It's all right," said Julian, catching their attention. "I know where you are. You can come out, unless of course you want to stay where the soldiers dump the bodies of those who try and escape the Red City." The trio tumbled out of the opening, gagging and coughing and wiping their clothes. Ruby came formed. "Are you going to take me back?" Julian regarded her thoughtfully. "Those were the king's orders, though he didn't mention whether you needed to be taken back directly," he said with a mischievous smile. "Don't toy with us," said Flamber, drawing her sword. "Speak plainly, or I shall kill you where you stand." The metal dog came to Flamber's side and bared its teeth. Julian moved his eyes between them for a time before bursting out laughing. "It would not be wise to attack an Imperial soldier, Miss Flamber," she replied curtly. "Surely not." He regarded her more closely. "General Flamber? Legendary pilot of the Behemoth? Wielder of the Imperial Edge?" Flamber's mouth shut tightly. "I'm none of those things anymore." Ruby stared at Flamber. "You used to be a general?" "Used to be!" exclaimed Julian. "She was the king's most decorated general before she disappeared after being sent to the Black Canyon, and—" Flamber lifted her sword up towards Julian's neck in a flash. "Another word, and it'll be your last." Julian drew back. "I mean only respect, General Flamber." "I serve the king no longer," said Flamber. "Do not address me so." Ruby held her breath as the pair stared at each other. "I commend you for your effort to make it this far, Flamber," said Julian slowly, "though the ambush waiting for you on the other side of the ravine will most likely end your attempt of making it to the outer lands." "Ambush?" Ruby blinked. "You're warning us. Why? You expect us to go with you, don't you?" she said before Julian could speak. "I'll take my chances with the ambush." She lowered her sword and began to walk away. "You've bested one watcher," called out Julian. "How about a dozen?" Flamber stopped mid-stride. "Plus there's a whole platoon of titles as well. Oh, and if not mistaken," continued Julian, "the Prince of the Red Palace himself." Ruby could taste bile at the mention of his name. "Seems you took something of his, Ruby. His father was most displeased he lost it. I thought from the yelling he was about to throw his son down after you," he finished with a broad grin. "I wish he had," muttered Ruby. "So what do you want?" said Flamber. "A claim for capturing the girl yourself? Well, you'll have to get through me first." Now," said Julian. "I mean to take all of you, not just Ruby. Besides, I'll need your help to where we're going. Things are rough, and I could use a little strategic thinking." "Where is that?" "Why, the Grey, of course.